Well, hello, everybody. It is official. Hang the banners. Cleveland Browns, 3-0 preseason. I think today's outcome, the way the Rams addressed it, and probably going to have to answer to the NFL probably a tad bit for the way the Rams addressed things today. But expected the Cleveland Browns probably to win this one, playing starters. Well, majority of starters, I would say. Certainly going to get to the rookie quarterback talk. Certainly can't avoid that. And, you know, I guess after yesterday's show, I may have some comeuppance to come my way as well. Jeff Lloyd, of course, from the OBR, Pete Smith, Jacob Roche, Fred Greetham, when he gets done with all the post-game tasks, is probably going to pop in with us as well. Cleveland Browns, game-winning field goal. They absolutely close out. I think, for me, training camp, preseason, I think went probably a lot better than I think most of it would have expected. Certainly a lot of questions here. You know, I think you got Joe out there, you know, got his feet wet. I certainly want to talk about the running game because I think for a team that so much is predicated on it. I don't think we necessarily really have much to go on at all. But we're going to break it all down. Appreciate everybody certainly for being here. Get lively in the chat. And Pete Smith, first off, congratulations, Pete, to you and the guys last evening. And, Browns 3-0 and 14 days away from all this starting to be absolutely 110% real.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're happy that they came out and did okay against the Rams kind of twos. I mean, defensively, the Rams could do nothing against the Browns mostly ones. With the caveat that there was no Myles Garrett, which is certainly helpful. No Denzel Ward, no Greg Newsome, and they were completely smothered. I don't know how encouraged I am by what I saw from the offense since they punted twice. They did finally get in the end zone, and they, at least for some amount of time, lost their starting center, which to me sort of ruins the whole thing. But nevertheless, they got through it and got a touchdown to Harold Fannin, which looked good. They did some interesting things. They put some guys in some places that we haven't seen yet. And they ordered some things really weirdly, I think, in an interesting way with their wide receivers. Like Caden Davis, I think, started. But then they put in Jamari Thrash with Dillon Gabriel. They did some other things along those lines. And then they filtered out Jack Conklin pretty quickly and left Wyatt Teller in there with DeJuan Jones. And then they got everybody else out. Nothing groundbreaking other than I mean, I think the most positive thing I take away from what I saw from the quote unquote first unit was the rookies. Carson Schwessinger looked like I'd expect him to look, and Dylan Sampson and Harold Fannin both had moments that sit there and go, oh, that's good stuff.
Yeah, and that was one thing I got to yesterday. You just wanted to get and the touchdown was great for Fannin, but you just wanted to get the feet wet. Just get something, where he felt like, hey, I'm not necessarily, just a rookie here, and obviously the touchdown certainly just amplifies it. Certainly, for him, now, that's it. You feel like you're a part of the team now, name in the box score, all of that type of stuff. Schwessinger, I don't know if there's enough glowing superlatives you can put. And even, towards the end, the interview, with, of course, Mason Graham and Carson Schwessinger with the DD, and, their neighbors, and, obviously going to kind of work kind of in lockstep. So certainly, in some things that Browns fans just really haven't been fortunate enough to have for the last few years. You really just haven't had, a rookie class to really look forward to. It was more of, can the guys essentially play, over their heads, so to speak. I know we want to talk probably some wide receivers as well. There's, certainly a lot to get to, probably hit a little bit everywhere. Jacob, I mean, I guess we'll kind of, general thoughts, and then, let's get into some quarterback discussion.
Yeah, I just thought that the offense looked like an NFL offense, which I can't say that we ever saw that in the preseason or for large chunks of the regular season last year. So I think that was the thing I was going into this game, knowing we'd get to see Flacco and stuff on that part of it. I'm like, does this just look like an NFL offense? Does it look like a competent offense? Like they know what they're doing. They have an identity. They're doing, what does that look like? And it looked kind of, the way I wanted it to look. It wasn't perfect. They've got some work to be done, but Joe Flacco's arm is still Joe Flacco's arm. And Harold Fannin was doing what we thought Harold Fannin was. And we even got some Aiden Huntington on on offense. I know that made Pete very happy. So I just felt like the operation looked good. And that was really what I needed to see from that group.
Yeah, you can only go so long where it's on air, or it's against your own guys. The measuring stick certainly is going against the other team's guys. Granted, the other team's guys certainly weren't out there today. Certainly weren't at the level, of course, what the Cleveland Browns offense is, defense is, or even number 2 defense, to be completely honest with you. But you want to get those away, and I think, and that's what's kind of bothered me with some teams here this weekend with not playing first team offenses. It's not 1 week, man. It's 2. And granted, and Pete, I agree with you. Posick, leaving the building with a knee brace on certainly is nothing that anybody is, excited about at this point in time. But the fact that it would have been another 2 weeks, and look, some teams, and look, everybody handles it differently. The Chiefs have Mahomes and Kelsey out there. Then there's teams that are certainly not on that level who opted not to do it. It is your choice. You do what you think is best for your team. But I think it goes a long way, because at least now it's, hey, all right, well, this is something that maybe didn't work as well as we thought it would. And it gives you more time to prepare, because you have this week, and then, as quickly as Labor Day weekend comes, it's a whole different week now, as you just get right into the Bengals week. And there certainly is less time, to adjust on the fly. I guess we'll get into it. I think Gabriel came in and, first was a little not necessarily too great. I think the 2-minute offense was probably really good for Dillon Gabriel, because that's kind of more, at least, last year, and certainly Dillon had played at 3 different universities. That was a lot more of playing, I think, at like Dillon Gabriel's speed, that Oregon did last year. We're going to run a boatload of plays. So him being in that 2-minute offense, and, everybody knows who I think is the better quarterback. Whoever I think the better quarterback was not the better quarterback today. And that's, there's a lot more to go with that as far as anything else. But, I think Gabriel, went in, and, once he felt like he was back into it, I just think he got the groove really going.
You really want to go with Shedeur as the better quarterback right today?
No. That's right. Shedeur was not the better quarterback. Shedur's the better. I think Shedur's the better quarterback. He is not the better quarterback today.
I would think we'd want to reevaluate the situation of how we feel about where the pecking order is, given what we saw today. But
there's no question with it. This is it. There's no more. There's no more auditions, and this is going to really hurt Shedeur for a while. But go ahead.
Look, the first drive, I thought Dillon Gabriel forced a couple throws that he didn't need to. I thought he was trying to. One, I liked that he threw the ball away a couple times. That was good. But like when they got down in the red zone, and he rolled out to his left, he forced that ball to Jamari Thrash that went low. He tried to put it in the one spot that maybe Thrash could come up with it. And if he was just like a half a beat later, Caden Davis was going to come open on the scramble drill, and I think he could have hit that. By and large, look, I mean, Dillon Gabriel has a very clear skill set. He does what he does, and he does it well. How far does that go? He doesn't have – I've said this before. He doesn't have nearly the set of tools in terms of throws that Shedeur has, but he knows how to use his tools at a really, really high level. Maybe he's got a hammer and a screwdriver, and that's all he really needs. But he does it well. And, he was able to dissect the defense. Timing-wise, the ball comes out fast. There are any number of times where the DB just cannot react fast enough to deal with some of the stuff he does. He made a number, again, one of the knocks that were there, and I don't want to suggest that these were not real, that he went through days of practices of training camp where he was not accurate. In 2 preseason games, that has not shown up. He's been very accurate. He's been very precise, puts the ball in a spot that not only does it get the ball to the receiver in a way they can catch it, but he allows them to start gaining yards after the catch. And it didn't seem to matter. To this point, it does not seem to matter who's out there. And again, I think he is more in the long lines of a left-handed Case Keenum, but he lets Kevin Stefanski do things that he liked to do with Baker Mayfield, which is get him out, roll him out, those play-action stretch things, and just get the ball to the open guy. That was always the thing with Baker Mayfield early in his career with Cleveland. It didn't matter. If you were open, he's going to get you the ball. Dillon Gabriel does the same thing. He will throw it to whoever, which I think really works in his favor, and it keeps the defense off balance to a certain extent. So, I don't think Dillon Gabriel necessarily changed my opinion or anything. I just think he continued to show me more of what I already thought he could do. Dillon Gabriel, he had the interception and the fumble last week, bad, but just he consistently has the answers. He knows where the ball's supposed to go, and when he operates on time, he's really difficult to stop. He's not a guy who's going to do much in terms of improvising. He's not a guy that's going to give you he can't extend plays and make a whole lot happen at this point. I don't know that he ever will, but what he does, I think, can carve out a career. Is that going to be good enough to start? Maybe, maybe not. Is that worth a third-round pick? Maybe, maybe not. But you can at least see a path where he can be successful and lead your team. And, if he continues on this path and the Browns find their franchise quarterback, whoever it is, and he's the backup, and that guy goes down for 3 games, can Dillon Gabriel come in and win 1 or 2 of those? If that's what he can do, then there's some value in that.
I agree. I think he plays, and look, if he's going to be a long-term backup, he plays like a long-term backup. I'm not going to try to do more than I can do. Oh, guess what? 83 is open in the flat. I'm throwing the ball to 83. Oh, guess what? 22 is open on the hook. All right, 22 is getting the ball. And, sometimes quarterback play does not have to be Patrick Mahomes-esque. Sometimes it's, hey, bunts, singles, things that, baseball references, things that would, just doing something that ends up being positive. Guys, I'm not trying to trash Shedeur in any way whatsoever. This is kind of what I said to you all yesterday. I wanted to see him play with players that I thought were more on his level. I do think he didn't play with the best players today, but some of those sacks also were kind of egregious and kind of what were the problems at Colorado. So we're going to move right past that, but certainly we can talk about that later. But and again, now Pete, when we talked about this last week about the interception, and Kevin Stefanski, well, there are 2 guys in the same pond, this, that, and the other thing. Well, at the end of the day, it was still on Dillon Gabriel. He threw the ball. Yep. So that's what comes away to me with today is I didn't see it. Therefore, I'm not throwing it, and that's what you're kind of hoping for with any young player, certainly a young quarterback, growth. You know what? If I don't see it, I got to trust myself. I'm not throwing it. You know what? We can punt. We can do this again. We can come back, that type of stuff. And, for Gabriel, and I wasn't a big fan of his pregame wardrobe. I'm not going to lie to you guys. He looked like he was going to skate park. So I know some people actually messaged me about the tweet I put out about that. It did make him kind of look like a kid, whatever. But you can see why coaches like him, why they appreciate him, because it's not going to be, he took a 23-yard sack, and I'm not pointing fingers. It's not going to be that, he if it wasn't there, he's just not going to do it. And, it's kind of vanilla, and it's not going to be ever very sexy. But, again, I agree, Pete, if he's a guy you got to put out there, he's going to know everything. Does ability prevent him from maybe doing a couple of things? That's fine. But I don't think he's ever going to go out there with this gunslinger mentality, Jameis Winston style, where, hey, he may throw 4 picks, but still find a way to win the game. It's just not the way Dillon plays the game and the way he's going to play the game in the league. And I think that's and you just see it. And when you hear the coaches talk, they appreciate it because they know what he's going to give them. He's going to play on time. He's going to play within the system. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, so I was very famously, Pete Smith said this was a Jacob Roach pick when it was made. So everybody understands how I felt.
When you were in the dungeons looking for mankind.
I was in the depths of the stadium and people were trying to rat me out so I'd get arrested or something. I don't know what was going on there. No, the thing is, I've wrestled with the 4 quarterback things for a bunch, because I don't want to keep Pickett over a 10th offensive lineman. Like that's kind of like and Andrew Berry did talk about maybe it would be a linebacker or a safety that would be the casualty to keeping the 4th quarterback. But if you get that version of Dillon Gabriel, and I know he wasn't going against the starters, I understand that he wasn't going against the Rams stars, but yeah, that dude, you see why they liked him. He did exactly his job, which I called him a point guard. I thought he was the best point guard quarterback in the NFL draft. Like, does that mean he'll ever be a franchise guy? Not necessarily, but will he do what Bo Nix does? He's not as talented physically as Bo Nix, but can he do what Bo Nix does for Sean Payton and by being an extension of his coach on the field and doing exactly what it is the coach wants him to do? Yeah, and the coach is not going to ask him to do much more else than that because he understands the limited skill set based on the size and all those things. Although I thought it was kind of interesting, he didn't run at all. Like I thought even on that Caden Davis, Caden Davis was going to come open when he threw it to Jamari Thrash. I think he could have just ran it. Which I wonder about the hamstring and that sort of thing. But if that's the Dillon Gabriel that you feel confident, like I'm not that scared about him being the backup quarterback. I mean, I would still stash like a Tyler Huntley on the practice squad just in case, that kind of thing. But like, he was a smooth operator. He did exactly what he was asked to do. I've got it over here, early PFF grades. He's third. They gave him an 88.4 PFF grade today in this game. Like, that 2-minute drill when he was 9 of 11 and just marched down the field, like, he didn't look like a rookie to me on that drive. Again, I get it. Second team preseason, I get all of those things. But this is the you guys talked about this, like what it looked like last week versus this week. I didn't have very many moments where I wanted to rip my hair out, and there was a few of them last week. Like, there was a few situations. Last week I would have given him a B-. I'm giving it a B+ at this point. Like, he did his job. And you guys highlighted really, really well about the Oregon stuff. He's so good in that 2-minute because it's like quick, fast, get the ball out, don't give them a chance to sack you, don't make a negative play. And he does that so well because he knows where his hot read is. He understands where the pressure is coming. He does a good job pre to post snap diagnosing coverages. And you just saw all the things they liked about him. Like, is he limited physically? Absolutely. But can he run this offense efficiently? And if they get really good, a good run game and a really good defense, could it win some games? Yeah, I think it could.
Yeah, and again, it's not about, and look, we'll all continue to say this, this is about 2025. 2026, I think we all kind of agree that none of this is probably going to matter once 2026 comes around, the way it's looking for the Browns. And, when it first went down and, I remember all of us just, in our mixed reactions and, and some of us, hey, what if it's maybe just because he's going to be the number 2 here for, quite a while. And when he plays, he plays. And, the point guard reference, I think, Jacob, is really good because I think himself, he probably doesn't think he's out here just, basically beating the world and, doesn't think he's ever going to be in a conversation, probably in top 20 quarterback play, top 25. He just wants to go out there and do his thing. And, if his guys look good and he makes them look good, I think that's the mindset Dillon Gabriel kind of plays himself with. Again, the 2-minute drive, it just looked like this was something where it was like, if he got to choose the drill, this is what the drill he would have chosen. Oh, can we do that, coach? I'm saying, like when, kids in practice on their birthday, well, what do you want to do? We're going to let you put it. And he just jumped in, and all of a sudden, again, it looked like, he was really, really comfortable. It probably was also the benefit of getting to play 2 weeks in a row, as he sat out that first preseason game. So he was able to take anything negative that he felt, when he was critiquing himself last week, was able to use that, certainly and fuel himself and going into this week. And, however, when things came up, all right, well, we're not going to do that again, throwing the ball away as opposed to throwing it into, what ended up being kind of a busted play. That was the interception in Philadelphia. Maturation, growth. And, again, that's something it's going to be hard when we're talking about quarterbacks that are 23 years old is, they kind of are what they are. They're not 21. There's not more of a, these guys probably are at their ceilings. The question is whether or not their ceilings are good enough, Pete.
Yeah, look, was just efficient, which is what you ask him to do. You want him to do his job. He does his job. He gets the ball out to his playmakers, and they do the rest, which is all you can ask of him in these situations. I was blown away by the fact that he threw 19 passes in such a short amount of time, able to lead a couple scoring drives and just continue to move the ball down the field and lead them to points. Beyond that, I mean, we can get into protection issues and all this stuff, but it's easy to protect when the ball's out. It's catch, step, throw. He's athletic enough to help his protection, to limit pressure and get the ball to where it needs to go. There were a couple plays, at least one or two, where he checked to other plays. He's got a handle on these things, and as he should. He's played 62 games of college football or whatever it is. He should be ready to step in and play. That's what, if you're going to draft a 24-year-old quarterback, he can't be a project. He's got to be somebody who can step in and do stuff. And if you're going to be a backup quarterback, which again, I still think is likely the answer ultimately. You want to be as stress-free as possible in terms of, the coach shouldn't be, trying to fix things. You've got to know it. You've got to be on top of everything else. The one thing I would sort of hesitate on is, let's say the Browns keep both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, as I expect they will, into next season. If they draft a quarterback who's not ready, just let's say Lenore Sellers declares the Browns draft him. He's not somebody I would want to put right onto the field. So what these guys are doing right now, whether it's Gabriel or Shedeur, they're going to have a real shot to start next year. And if that happens, who says they're going to let go of the job? You've seen it with Drew Brees. They drafted Phillip Rivers 4th overall, and he didn't give away the job. It ended up going away. He ended up losing with a shoulder injury, but Drew Brees took the job and ran with it. So if that's the situation that plays out, these guys are still viable until they aren't. I look forward to a scenario where the Browns have a rookie next year, for most likely first-round pick, and these 2 quarterbacks. Then you've got 3 quarterbacks you're sort of excited about seeing grow and develop and seeing what they can do. Is even if that's going to ultimately potentially not go very far with Gabriel in terms of his upside, where Shedeur's got more of that. There's also more, there's sizable basement as well. But nevertheless, I mean, that's kind of the best case scenario, especially for Kevin Stefanski, who likes to coach quarterbacks. You've got Tommy Rees, who has a ton of familiarity with young quarterbacks, and you got Bill Musgrave, who's happy to coach whoever.
Yeah. Now, shifting here to Shedeur, and I think part of Shedeur's issues today were not playing last week. We're playing behind Gabriel, and it kind of was like, well, how fast can I get this team to the end zone? And things that we saw in Carolina, where we said, you know what? It looks like he's getting away from some of the issues he had at Colorado. There was certainly a couple of times in the Carolina game, where we saw, what was one of the biggest negatives in his game. Look, when he can just throw the ball, Shedeur Sanders can probably play with a lot of quarterbacks. But when it comes down to, mobility within the pocket, trying to extend the play, I keep using the phrase, I think Shedeur thinks he's more athletic than he is. And just, hey, ball in hand, get ball out. And, I can understand it because, he missed the 8 days of practice. He missed the Philly game. And then certainly coming in after Dillon certainly looked kind of impressive, obviously, today. It was kind of like, when you can't hit a grand slam with nobody on base. And I kind of think that was maybe something that maybe Shedeur was kind of going through today. All people in the comments, I absolutely, truly acknowledge you, and I agree with you. He was not playing with any wide receiver that's going to be any part of the Cleveland Browns. I mean, Joe Thomas literally called the left tackle soft on air.
The left tackle played for both quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, so look, yes, you can make excuses for Shedeur's play today. There is no doubt about it. But the problem is he didn't look so great. And Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel did. And so, it's a really tough spot. And because now all of a sudden the practices become even more limited, how much time do you have to, make sure Joe gets the work he needs? We're not grooming rookie quarterbacks here anymore. It's about who's the number 2 quarterback. And unfortunately, whoever the number 3 quarterback is, and I think we all think that way that's going to go, if Pickett can do full practices, we're going to have Fred Greethan pop in here in 3 seconds. The number 3 quarterback is most likely going to be Joe Burrow right now. That's the way it's going to go. That the number 3 quarterback is going to be playing Joe Burrow for the next couple of weeks. That is the way it's going to go. Fred, we are just going to shift a little bit. Jacob, we'll get back to you to Shedeur here. Fred, first things first, obviously, Ethan Posick goes down today. And unfortunately, in a knee brace. Is there anything you have for us? Can enlighten us any further than maybe we don't know yet?
Yeah, I got the initial reaction that it wasn't serious. I mean, Joe Flacco sounded like it wasn't a long-term injury. But who knows? Stefanski
So there's an MRI coming or tests, exactly.
Yeah, MRI tomorrow, normal testing. You know the drill. He says day to day, and the guy's out a month. Who knows? but I did see him walk off the field with no help. I mean, I don't know with those type of injuries, you know, usually you limp and so forth. I didn't see that. I don't know if they showed it on the TV feed, but he did have a brace on. But, you know, I have seen guys walk out of the stadium before with boots on, walking boots, and the next, I mean, they put them in all kinds of deals when they're out there. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they give very little information. Stefanski was pressed about even Shedeur, you know, going to the X-ray room or something. He said no, nothing wrong with him. So, you know, I didn't hear all who he was talking about, but I think Strong had a concussion.
Yep.
Aquara had a rib injury. McDonald, I don't know if he had a concussion or what they called it, but basically, yeah. I mean, Luke Whippler, you know, they feel pretty good about him if he has to step in, but I think it's a little premature. You got 2 weeks. We'll see. We'll see if he's back at practice this week, you know, if they hold him out all week or what.
Okay. And I do remember actually back, I believe it was 2018, if we all remember what the legend of J.C. Treader became. J.C. Treader wore a walking boot all week long, went out on the field on Friday, used to participate in walkthrough, and somehow J.C. Treader would go out and man up and get through 60 to 70 plays on game day, and then basically rinse and repeat for the entire week. You know, so certainly, you know, premature, but, you know, didn't leave on a cart, anything of that nature. So certainly positive. God forbid it's Luke Whippler. We're talking about actually one of the guys who's gotten a lot of positive run here this summer, Luke Whippler, you know, as far as, you know, finally getting an opportunity to put together, you know, practices, days, weeks together, you know, but again, you know, premature, 14 days to go. Fred, what else might you have for us?
Well, I got to get this in. I asked Stefanski about the young pass rushers, particularly Aiden Hayden, and he announced that he has made the team. He said he got permission from Andrew Berry. So, you know, there you go, Pete. There's your guy you were on from day one.
Can we acknowledge the fact that you asked the one question, what is about quarterbacks, and it broke news?
I know. I mean, I'm underrated because I'm quiet and I don't barge in, but I was appreciative that he announced that right then and there. So there's my little 10 cents to today. Even my wife texted me and said she heard my question and she thought it was good, that it was about somebody different than Shedeur.
Oh, Fred's getting the steak tonight when he gets home.
There we go.
I don't know about that, but we got plenty of good stuff here at the stadium. But yeah, you know, so that was, you know, I just think, you know, obviously a lot of the talk about the Shedeur Sanders. I thought they should have brought him out for the last drive just to see, you know. I don't know if you talked about that, but he said all along the plan was to put Snoop out there at the end. I think Sanders was disappointed, obviously, had 5 bad drives or nothing to show for it. That would have probably redeemed everything if he would have let him down. Not that Huntley did so much. You know, when you think about it, it was just penalties. You know, they had personal fouls and penalties. He only threw 1 pass for 7 yards. He did have 1 run, but, you know, so he was asked about the kicking situation, said we got to make a decision. I thought it was a little interesting they put Smith out there to end the game. You think you'd want to see if Hopkins can come through. You put out the young guy and he comes through. So what are you going to do now?
Not only
You know,
that,
I mean,
but
the kicker thing.
the miss by Hopkins set up Schmidt to potentially take his job.
Yeah,
No question about it.
because you would have had a tie, and then it wouldn't have been as big a deal. But I don't know what the deal is. You know, these extra points, he has trouble hitting them, it seems like.
But even that chip shot field goal almost snuck out of there on it. And then they drive down the field and they let Schmidt go out there and it just right down Broadway. That's right. Every kick he's kicked in the preseason has been right down Broadway. It's an easy decision to me personally.
Well, I think the thing is you're riding the hot hand, and then we're all going to talk about, you know, I mean, Schmidt being the new guy, whereas, you know, we all going to go back to last year where, you know, Hopkins was, you know, just an absolute roller coaster. And, you know, for a team that's probably going to be, strapped for wins. And we think the Browns can be competitive. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to win a lot of games, but these games that could be close, would you rather trot out, the new kicker and, have a couple of mistakes, or have Hopkins do it again? And it's like, well, why did we do this to ourselves all over again? Which certainly could be the possibility.
Lingering baggage with Hopkins is not helpful either. I think that part of the problem is there's already this sense of dread that accompanies Dustin Hopkins anytime he walks out on the field. I mean, it's just there comes a point where you can't get over that, and he keeps confirming why you should be worried about it.
Well,
I don't know.
Go ahead, Fred.
I don't know if there's kicking competition around the league with any prominent guys that might get cut, but there's a reason for that, to begin with. But yeah, it will be interesting to see what they do there, because like you said, I think last year your kicking game cost you 2 or 3 games, and many times that could have been the difference in getting on a winning streak or getting things going. When you're gonna be, I think, challenged a little bit offensively for a while, it would seem on the surface, and you need a kicker that's going to put it between the uprights. And I think they all realize that. They have to have confidence that Smith or another guy would be the answer over Hopkins, because I remember when I was way back in the day when they cut Don Cockcroft and went with Joseph. I think it was Cockcroft that got cut, but a kid that had never kicked before. He didn't last long, but it wasn't Joseph. I can't remember his name, but I'm dating myself. But yeah, it's like, what are you going to do? Hopkins was gold. You give him the big contract, and then he hasn't been, but a 50-50 kicker since.
In 2023, there were times where it'd be like, we're totally content with this field goal opportunity of 53 yards for Dustin Hopkins. 2024, it was more of, I don't know if we're comfortable with Dustin Hopkins from 45. So, we're going to go for this here. And, obviously it didn't really go well for them, and nothing did in 2024, but, he was night and day in 2024 than he was in 23. And, now when you see any signs of this, and it's always weird with kickers, because the Browns could totally move on from Dustin Hopkins, and by week 1 or week 2, Dustin Hopkins could be in a new scenario, and all of a sudden he's money again. Like, it's so weird with kickers the way it works. Like, they just get out of the environment they in, get into a new one, and all of a sudden they're off and running again. But,
it's all about that. Ever since that kick return, he tried to run down Damian Pierce and pulled his hamstring. He's never been right since. And I don't know if it's because of the hamstring, but he was totally on. He needed 1 point to tie Jim Brown for the franchise record. It was a sensational year. And then ever since that hamstring, it's been like, what are you getting? So.
Yeah, if anybody wants to examine the kicker tape, let's go up to, most of Dustin Hopkins' kicks before Christmas Eve in 2023, and then maybe go through some kicker tape of 2024, and, maybe we can, kind of find something. Fred, one thing I wanted to get to here today is, this Stefanski team has always been the offense has been so predicated on the running game. And I think right now, we're going kind of blind here into this regular season as far as the running game. Look, Joel didn't play today. Totally understandable. Jerome, Dillon Sampson, certainly limited to this point. I think the Browns don't, some people weren't, sure if the Browns are going to bring in a running back. If you wanted to say it was going to be Pierre Strong and somebody else, that window may have closed today. But one of the things that's, most important to how this offense functions, we really have no idea where this running game is at right now.
No, and it's really a mystery to me about the Quinshon Judkins situation. You haven't heard anything.
Yeah, Fred, you guys have nothing on that, whether it's the team, whether it's the camp, whether we're waiting on the league?
No, the only clue to me is when Adam Schefter tweeted, he must have got something from the Browns or something that the other day when he said they're kind of waiting for the NFL. So I don't know if they're trying to get an indication, if he's going to be suspended, or if so, for how long, or how that works. I don't know if they can communicate like that, but it is strange because you thought some movement, they'd sign him, they'd bring him in, even if he is suspended, to get him up to speed to some degree. Because right now, I don't know if you can depend on Jerome Ford and Dillon Sampson. Strong, has shown a little bit. But when he's playing as much as he is, that tells me he's kind of on the bubble. So I don't know. I don't know if another running back from another team, is, in the cards or what it is. But it is. They had so much big plans you can see, obviously, on Judkins, and to get 2 weeks from the season and have no clarity, even if they said, okay, he's suspended for 6 weeks, at least you'd know, it's like there's no clarity at all on what's going on. And I think it's just going to be a committee, it's going to be like it's been the last 2 years, no real go-to back. So, and that doesn't help Joe Flacco. I mean, you can see today, and he's got a little bit, where he can do the play action. That was a beautiful pass to Fannin, for the touchdown. And, and I think that, the offense is going to have a different element without any semblance of a running game. I mean, today they had 85 yards, average under 4 yards a carry, which is not good. So, yeah, it will be, to me, a big question mark. And you hope that gets settled by cut down day here in a couple of days.
Yeah, certainly the questions there. The one thing I was just going to say about Huntley going in there, I think maybe that was more of a, we know Huntley can run. We know Huntley can kind of protect himself. So if we have any chance to maybe set up a last-second field goal here, let's go with the agile quarterback. And you got to see that, certainly a little bit with Huntley. Pete, everybody's excited about Huntington. I got news for you guys. The way Huntington's playing, the fullback stuff may not happen much more because he may be too valuable in other places. But Pete, the running game, it's always been such a staple here. And it just feels definitely like we're very, very unsure of where it's at. And without seeing much of the offensive line, that's certainly, this entire summer and where they are at collectively certainly probably creates a lot of questions for a lot of fans.
Right. Well, I mean, some of it comes down to they're counting on the offensive line to do enough. Now, enough to get 3-4 yards. Beyond that, it's can somebody elevate and give you more than that? And obviously, selecting Quinshon Judkins 36th, that was what that was for. We'll see where that goes. Hopefully, they'll get a resolution sooner than later. But until they do, I fully expect the Browns are going to bring in somebody in on a waiver claim. I had projected long ago the Denver Broncos was the team. And I have not wavered from that. I still think it's going to be the team. Audric Estime played running back for Notre Dame, and Tommy Rees, who is the offensive coordinator. I think the Browns' offense caters to Audric Estime if he's indeed going to be waived. So that makes sense. But I would have been happy with Blake Watson. I would have been happy with Jaleel McLaughlin. I just like with the Broncos had too many guys. So I think that makes sense. The saving grace, I think, for Ford and Sampson is they both catch the ball really well, which I think gives them some options. You saw Jerome Ford, Jerome Ford has become everybody's disappointment in terms of we wasted the good surprise on you, Jerome Ford. But all he does is catch the ball and do some things with it. I get he's a little bit feast or famine with some of his vision, but the play from Dillon Sampson was impressive. The Browns have been sort of, I don't want to say hiding him because they've used him in the joint practices. They just haven't used him much in the preseason because they can afford it. So Quinshon Judkins obviously a huge piece. They're going to get some other help, and I do think they can get a running back that can contribute. It's just not going to likely be running back one that's going to sort of change your franchise the way that you use that 36th pick to do it. But can you get a combination of guys that's going to give you enough? And given what they were able to do in 2023 with Joe Flacco with no running game, I don't know if they need a ton more than that. As long as the defense is good and the ball goes between the uprights and those type of things happen, but certainly you can say that the running game makes more sense, is more orderly. There's more rhyme and reason to why they're doing the things they're doing as opposed to last year where it felt very discombobulated. I don't care who's on the field so far in the preseason. I feel like they're getting some push and they're creating some opportunities. I mean, Pierre Strong kept getting pasted, but he had running lanes throughout this one. So, I think it's going to be mediocre relative to, where they need it to be, but it's still going to be a hell of a lot better than it was last year, which was non-existent.
Look, Pierre Strong's been here. This will be year 3. I think we've all seen enough to realize that we've seen enough. But Pete, one of the reasons I love Dillon Sampson, and I'll kick it to you, Jacob, here afterwards. One of the reasons I love Dillon Sampson so much through this process is one of the reasons we both loved Audric Estime so much during last year's process. Audric Estime didn't turn 20 until September 6th. I'm 21. Dillon Sampson will not turn 21 until September 14th. When you're talking running back, age matters, Jacob.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're talking about a dude that was like the SEC Offensive Player of the Year as a 20-year-old.
And he's not really gotten any extended run here yet. Yes.
Yeah. I just looked it up because I was curious when you guys were talking about the run game. Between Ford and Sampson combined, I've got 11 snaps is what I have here. So, like, yeah, you did not see that, like, those guys at all. But, like, the thing about Dillon Sampson is I've always said I worry about him in like some of the short yardage situations, but at the same time, I think he's got really impressive contact balance for a guy of his size. And you saw that on that first down. They tried to hit him up high and he spun off of it and got a first down on that reception. And I thought he looked nice and explosive and decisive in the couple of plays that he had out there. And like, I think he's going to be really good for the screen game. But yeah, I was hoping we'd have a better feel for the run game, but we haven't seen the top guys like at all in the preseason. I do think Dillon Sampson can be a really big weapon for them with his skill set, but as of right now, it is kind of still a question mark.
Let's be honest. I mean, right now, the way the Bengals look, I don't know, week 1 is really going to give us the answer to our questions anyway.
Well,
to be fair. Fred, look, obviously we're peppering here with a whole bunch of offensive questions here. How about some defensive feedback? Because look, there's a lot of questions about, depth in some of these rooms. Linebacker room, took a hit where Buki Watson was playing well. They lose him. Mahmoud Diabate, no, I mean, I wonder if it's an illness, and I'm not trying to like speculate here, but when you don't really say what the injury is, it does give me some, pause and trepidation that, maybe it's not necessarily just an injury. The cornerback room certainly has some questions. So, just some thoughts here, because I just don't want to keep it all, offensive as you're in the building, and obviously around all day long. So you're seeing all areas of the team.
Yeah, the one little, I have no information other than I saw at the Avon St. Ignatius game when they were videoing Sanders. Diabate was standing right next to him. So if he had, I don't know what he has. I didn't see him walking or anything, but, he's kind of went under the radar. And until that first week, you don't have to give out any information, so they don't. So I would think this would be a big week, but I would think if he had something illness, he wouldn't be out walking around at a football game, but who knows? What do I know? Yeah, I think they took a hard look at that Dom Jones today. I started and I saw him playing quite a bit at corner. They got him with 5 tackles and on some special teams as well. I think that other linebacker, Mascarina Arnold, had led the team, had like 7 tackles. So, yeah, I think they're looking for answers. I mean, you talk about suspensions. I don't know what the deal is with Bush. I don't know if he was out there, and, I think he's counted on to be one of the starters. If not,
yeah.
And so, some questions will maybe be answered here soon, what they do with some of these roster guys. But I think more anything, it's the cornerbacks, and at that position. You know, do you count on Cameron Mitchell and Miles Harden to be your backups? Or like you were talking about running back, do you go find the waiver wire, or do you make a trade, or do you get one of those free agent guys that are sitting out there and bite the bullet and go get one on a 1-year deal? So I still think they got some questions, but you don't want to waste the production of this defensive line, which seems like it's deep and productive. And yeah, they could get to the quarterback and make the quarterback get rid of it quicker, and that makes the defensive backs look better. But it would help if you had some lockdown on the back end. I think a lot of it at corner depends on Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome. I mean, we know both them are kind of injury prone, so that's why I think you need to bolster it up a little bit.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, because it seemed like there's been a lot of times over the last couple of years where it's like, well, do we at least have 2 of the 3? And, you kind of just piecemealed it together from there. Emerson obviously is not walking through that door anytime soon. So, that's certainly going to put a close, to that question. Pete and Jack Duffin, if you're listening, keep go ahead. Keep, trying to put out the Alex Wright fire while we all keep trying to bring the coals back to life. And we're gonna still got a lot to get to, guys. But if Fred, we don't sure how much time Fred has, so we want to get what we can get from Fred. Nice. Only problem is, Jacob, we got to put that into a 1 now. So yeah, that's a Mason Graham routine. That's all right. Whatever. You can go take it to a tailor. Somebody will fix it for you. Pete, the edge room. And I got to be honest, there's a lot of guys that you just like there, but you got to get to 5.
Sure. When they traded Juwan Briggs, I think they solved their problem. Even though I'm disappointed they traded Juwan Briggs, but I think it makes it easy. I think I'm hoping that they just decide Aiden Huntington. They can call him an edge or whatever, but he plays inside consistently. That he becomes the 5th defensive tackle, and then you can have Myles Garrett, Isaiah McGuire, Alex Wright, Joe Tryon, and then most likely to me Cameron Thomas, unless somebody jumps out. Unlikely on waivers or something. I think Cameron Thomas is going to get that last spot just because of his activity level and everything he does, and he can play specials. I'd like to see more from Joe Tryon, but for just as a memo to the rest of the league, blocking Alex Wright with the tight end is probably not the way to go. But that the Browns are creating a challenge for opponents, in that you have to deal with all these guys. Isaiah McGuire looks – it's hard to – I don't want to go like overboard and say he's going to be – he certainly has the potential to be a breakout player. I don't want to proclaim him one based off of what he's shown in the preseason. I would just say that he is so far above where he started last year that certainly gives you reason to believe he can take that next step and be that fully functional player opposite Myles Garrett. If Alex Wright can be even just 80% of that, which would be great. But if he's good enough that they're really, having questions as to who's better, that's a great situation for the Browns to be in. And then you've still got the rest of these guys, including Tryon and Thomas. And we saw, Tryon in pursuit and some other things in this game that were kind of interesting. I still want to see more from him, and I'm curious to see if he will, come alive a little bit more with stunts. And then you add in things like Carson Swetchinger blitzing, just to add that much more pressure. And it seems like there's no question that corner is a concern, but I think that's their way of dealing with it, is to just speed things up so much that it's going to be hard to deal with it. The other element that I thought was interesting, in addition to Dom mentioning Dom Jones, is interesting because he sort of plays corner like a safety, and that he was trying to get downhill consistently, which I approved. Him and Rayshawn Jenkins was, downhill physical presence, and that's the other way they can sort of try to navigate the situation. Andrew Berry, came on the broadcast and sort of hinted at the idea that the safety and linebacker rooms might be ways for the Browns to make the numbers work at other positions. Given what I've seen, that seems like an easy way to deal with it, because even if you like Mascarenas and some of these other guys, I don't think it's all that difficult to get them or potentially Christopher Edmonds to the practice squad. And it's the same way I sort of view tight end, and we'll see if Blake Whitehart's injury is something that matters or not, like is significant or not. But like when you have two guys that are relatively close and you can waive them both, you have to be at least reasonably confident that you're going to get one of them back to the practice squad, which makes it sort of easy to sort of make numbers work at other positions. So normally I know the Browns really like to have 5 safeties. I think they're going to have 4. And with the confidence they're going to get one of those guys to the practice squad. Might even be DeMonte KZ this year. I think they're going to keep Donovan McMillan, but we'll see. Same thing with linebacker. Would not shock me if they cut Jerome Baker and see if he gets to the practice squad, as well as Mascarenas, because I think as much as it really unfortunate that Buki Watson got hurt because he was playing really, really well, Devin Bush's suspension may give you what I assume will be a Devin Bush suspension sort of might give you an extra little roster spot, even if it's only for a couple weeks, to sort of figure it out, let the NFL roster sort of get settled, and then put another guy on the practice squad where teams might be sort of satisfied with their situation and then not bother. And the Browns have been using the practice squad as an extension of their linebacker and safety rooms anyway, with how they've done things. So that may be an easy way to alleviate things and allow them to be more active in trying to get more corner help or get another running back or get something else that maybe they feel like they have a deficiency. I would not be surprised to see some weird numbers in terms of what they keep in terms of position groups, at least on the initial 53, even if that gets sort of changed relatively quickly.
No, and we've seen this, for a while now, where they use that that practice squad, and I think ever since COVID, the practice squad has kind of been a little different. Like the poaching just doesn't seem like it's like it used to be. Fred, we can probably just go. I guess best thing to do, we'll pound out. Fred, are they keeping 4? Are we keeping 4 quarterbacks? Joe Flacco. I mean, I know people are trying to say maybe there's a scenario where Pickett goes to IR, but come Tuesday at 4:00, is your assumption as somebody who's within the building around the team is that the names on that roster will consist of Flacco, Pickett, Gabriel, and Sanders?
Yes. I think that it's decreased a little bit because Gabriel, if they have enough confidence for him to be the backup, but I think if you put Pickett on injury reserve, he misses 4 games. To me, that is your biggest time if you feel good about him, you leave him there as insurance because you play the Bengals, the Ravens, the Packers, the Lions. That would get you in trouble if Joe Flacco gets hurt and you got to throw one of the rookies out there. But if you feel Gabriel's ready to go, then you feel better about moving on. But I think Barry said during the broadcast today that, just like I asked him a while ago, that he sees a path to keep 4. If that's just speak, I don't know if they think they can get something for Pickett now or in the near future or whatever, but I think it's the gap's getting closer with their confidence. But I think they got burned and hope, with Josh Dobbs, even though he wasn't the end-all be-all, to throw DTR out there against the Ravens, and get annihilated. Did they feel good enough and arrogant enough, so to say, that Gabriel can handle it if he has to go in immediately? So I think there's 4 on the roster. It may not stay that way until the game, but I think that's the way to go. As you said, the practice squad to me is like AAA, minor leagues, like the Indians or Guardians. You see them all the time moving up and down. They just will bring up an extra tight end or cornerback or some position from the practice squad because now you can use those veterans, guys like Tony Brown or guys that might not make the roster that you put on the practice squad. So that's what I see. Yes, 4 quarterbacks.
Pete, 4?
Yeah, look, I think putting him on short-term IR defeats the purpose of his existence, and you're making a bad gamble that somehow the situation is going to get better in 4 weeks. If the idea is that you're indeed hoping to get a trade for him, you're sitting there thinking, well, in 4 weeks, maybe somebody's going to get injured and they're going to be more desperate for Pickett. I think, if anything, it hurts you, because if anybody's going to make a move for a quarterback, this would be that time to do it. Now, if there's a question that he's not healthy, they just won't trade for him. But I don't think I think all of that stuff will get sorted out before he comes back from short-term IR, and then you find yourself in a situation where you just delayed it. You used one of those. You only have so many of those short-term IR designations. You don't get to just use them over and over endlessly. Otherwise, teams would. So to use that up, it hurts you. If to Fred's point, if Joe Flacco, dies of old age tomorrow, they're going to need him to play now. They're not going to wait. If Dillon Gabriel isn't ready to go, I'm not sure 4 weeks is going to change much, or 6 weeks, 6 weeks. But either way, I think it makes all the sense in the world for them to keep Pickett active, even if his hamstring's not great. Even if it's not great, because I just don't see any benefit. I think they ultimately are taking a bad roll of the dice by putting him on injured reserve, because then they can't do anything with him.
Well, and the other thing is putting him on injured reserve, basically just, if you think there's any chance you can trade him and there's a small fire burning, you just put the fire out. People are just going to move on. If they want a quarterback, they're going to look for a quarterback now. And if you can't trade him because he's on IR, that, it squelches the whole idea of it. Jacob, 4?
I wish it wasn't, but yeah, everybody makes very valid
when Andrew Berry tells us how
Yeah.
people make excuses at other positions, I think he kind of told us, get ready for this. It's happening.
I mean, they literally what could you do to make that happen? Oh, maybe one less linebacker, one less safety.
Well, what you could do is have a guy like Aiden Huntington play several positions. And, that's, but there's other guys who are going to do this. There's other guys who are going to fill in other places. But that's how you mask it for the time being, is have, they'd love to have a fullback. But you know what, if we use a fullback just enough and we can find, other guys, and they did it last year. There was a linebacker who did some fullback stuff last year too. So, you can find a way to, cover it up, that way. I guess running back, we all agree that Ford's going to be here. We know Dylan Sampson's going to be here. I mean, you're keeping 4 on the 53. I mean, and maybe one of those guys is not here yet. And of course, there's the mystery, right, Fred?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Judkins is the big thing in the timeline there. I mean, I don't know if they want to give up an asset to get a front line guy or just another guy to join the committee. But depends on if Strong's in the concussion protocol. Maybe they looked at him as the third one. I don't know what they think about Travion Williams. So I think everything's fluid right now. They told you what you think of Jerome Ford when they said, take a 50% pay cut or we're going to let you go. So, that's why they drafted 2 guys, and the main guy they drafted isn't here. So I think all things are on the table.
You're going to get 3 running backs on the active roster, because Quinshon Judkins doesn't count till he's signed. So that solves itself. And then, Pierre Strong and Travion Williams are the same player. One of them is going to make your practice squad if you really want one of those. They're not that difficult to find. Amani Marshall's almost certainly going to make your practice squad. So you're going to get Jerome Ford, Dylan Sampson, and guy who's not here yet until Quinshon Judkins arrives, and then you go from there and move on from most likely guy you brought in, unless he really surprised you, in which case then maybe there's a world where they move on from Ford and just eat the money. But it's 3.
And, Travion Williams is probably the guy, if I'm targeting one for the practice squad, it's probably Williams. Because Strong, one of the assets would be returnability, but I don't think that's going to matter. Travion Williams, you make it in the league 7 years by being a backup running back because, again, we're talking about guys who can be jack all trades. and Travion Williams, whether it's, covering kicks, playing special teams, the rare time where they throw him the ball or, throw him a bone and, give him a carry within a game, and if he's comfortable here, he's an easy guy to go from practice squad to 53. And, it's weird because the Judkin thing's, it's just a mess, Jacob, right? There's just no way around it. It's just a mess because we went through it. And I think once we went through the situation and, then it was, we're not going to go any further with this. I think we all thought, okay, the clarity's here, get him in, get him going and let's go. And it feels like we're almost in the same amount of time of waiting from where the next step is from where we were in the first step.
I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day and I said, I'm just done trying to predict what, when, and how it's going to play out. And I'm just going to pretend that he just doesn't exist until he does, because it's kind of how it feels like it. I'm just going to look at this team as though he's not
guys
a part
are
of
so
it. Yeah. Because what else can I do? Because, it's like, oh, this report comes out and you start getting excited. And you're like, all right, they're signing Isaiah Bond. Like, that's a nice upside move. Oh, they're going to get Judkins in there and, and all this stuff. And then it just and then that crashes right back down. So I'm not going to get my hopes up anymore for that.
Okay. Obviously, look, we don't have a ton of time. Everybody's got, their OBR obligations. I will definitely bring you guys out another episode tomorrow. So I just want to make sure that everybody can get at least a closing point in here. So Fred, I will absolutely, start with you here. If you want to just take it from today, if you want to take it from the culmination of preseason, but by all means, Governor, the floor is yours.
I don't know. I'm spent. I've been here since 10 this morning, so I'm just trying to.
I see the time you guys check into the stadium on social media, and it blows my mind. Like, you guys are there earlier than some of the players.
Well, you have to be, beat the traffic and get everything ready. But no, I just think that, the Browns had, a positive preseason. Now you get down to when it really counts. I think it was good to get Flacco in the offense, get in, get out. You hope Posick isn't sidelined because of this. But I like the defense. I think that if they can play like the defensive line coming in waves, especially what I saw with those young guys, I think that'll bode well for this team. So I think their path to winning is great defense and, getting a run game. Now that's where the question is, what they wanted to do. I don't know if they can do it, but I like having Joe Flacco at the wheel. I think they can get off to a good start if they're going to with him. And the path is, play great defense and don't screw it up on offense like they did in the first 7 games last year. The defense played well enough to win. We all know that. Watson played historically bad. They're 1-6. Everybody knew the season was over, and it just went out of control from there. So that's the key there. Play good defense, and hopefully you can put enough points on the board to win a few games to stay relevant after those first 6 games. And then you go from there. If not, you turn it over and see what you have in the younger guys.
Fred, we appreciate you. Obviously, it's certainly been a long day for you, and I'm probably sure you're appreciative that there is now a 2-week break between the final preseason game and then, of course, week 1. But, for all of us here, you are a great asset, obviously, to us as far as what we all do within the OBR. A lot of us are contingent on, I'm ready to go. I'm kind of just waiting on the last, couple of nuggets I can maybe get from Fred. So, certainly from, coworker to coworker, we all appreciate you. And, obviously, you've been a legend here for a long time. Browns fans truly, truly appreciate you. And, hey, Mrs. Greetham, make sure there's a nice big fat dessert for Fred when he gets home, if you appreciate it, obviously, the press conference.
Appreciate it.
You got it, Fred. Have a great one.
All right, guys. All right,
Pete, I don't know if how you want to take this. If it wants to just be,
I've got 2 things. One,
well, I'm sure you've got one that you were going to go with here, but I'm sure that's just never one.
Yeah, it's not one because look, all the hard work and sacrifice finally paid off. We did it, Aiden Huntington, you and me. All the lifting,
I still remember.
all the weight room.
I still remember the messages. when the Browns signed him, and you guys were like, you guys don't get it. This dude is just like an absolute like bizarro freak. I think that's like how you put it. Like, I don't even know how to label him. He's a bizarro freak. And you know what? He's a bizarro freak.
I'm happy for him. I like the way the Browns handled this situation and gave the press conference the ability to say he's already made the team, because that was a nice moment. The second point, quarterbacks. Look, you can make the case that Dillon Gabriel was put into a better situation. That's fine. I'm not even going to argue that. What I will point out is, one, if you're put into a bad situation, as Shedeur was at points in this game, you cannot make it worse. And he consistently made situations in this game worse. Now, does that mean the Browns need to give up on him? Of course not. They need to coach him and figure it out. There are things I did not like, and it's not even, I don't even know if he's conscious that he's doing it, but there was some bad body language that he needs to sort of figure it out. The bottom line is, Dillon Gabriel's supposed to be readier than Shedeur Sanders, and he is. Shedeur Sanders has a lot of talent. He played an extraordinarily basic offense in Colorado. The same criticisms that were lobbied at Jackson Dart apply to Shedeur Sanders in terms of what he was asked to do. And he can throw. He has an incredibly talented ability to throw the ball, the amount of passes he can make, accuracy, touch, all those things. But so many of the other elements have to get better. How fast he reads stuff, how fast he processes things, and just being willing to give up on plays that are not there. And this was, I'm hoping this is the last lesson he needs on this, just how much faster even the worst guys, theoretically, not to slander anybody here, but the guys on the lowest end of the roster of the Rams are so much faster than the best guys that you faced in college. So hopefully that's the end of it and he can get better, but he's going to take time. As I broke down initially when I evaluated him, he's got talent to be a long-term starter, a real starter in 2 years. He also has problems that could get him out of the league in 2 years that have nothing to do with hype or any of the other crap, just stuff, football-related things that could get him out of the league. And you saw both in the first preseason game, the stuff that could make him great, and you saw in this preseason the stuff that could get him out of the league. So it's one of those things. You're never as good as you think you are, and you're or as bad as you think you are, and he's got to just figure it out and get better. Let him do it.
There's no evaluation if you never throw the ball. That's the problem. There's no evaluation. And that's kind of why we all got excited. And I certainly got excited after Carolina. And I wanted to see more. And I wanted to see, hey, want to know what? Because with him playing with the threes, and this was my thing, was everybody played with the Colorado. Hunter was certainly the exception as high as he was drafted. But Wester, Horn, Shepard, all made it to NFL camps. These are the guys we knew he could play with. Can he play with the Jerry Judys of the world? Can he play with the David Njokes of the world? And if he cannot get that pocket presence and not take these sacks, he's not going to get that call to the plate, that pinch hit opportunity. He's not going to get to the plate to get it. And, I still think today, like he overplayed himself and he wanted to try to just make everything happen on that first drive. And, but that's part of it, though, and it's patience and it's understanding. And it's taking what is there. Actually, I just got somebody who texted me, cut Dustin Hopkins and give Aiden Huntington number 7. He's so good, he deserves a single digit.
He does need
Jacob. He said, well, he looks like a guard. Let's be honest. Hey, you know what? You play like that. You rush the passer like that. You run down on kickoff, punt, whatever, and just lay dudes out. You can wear whatever you want. Tell the NFL you want to wear 00, whatever. I don't care. Jacob, some thoughts here. Again, if you want to take, just from camp to here, the game today, whatever, I'll have one parting shot for myself.
So just like not talk quarterbacks aside, because I think they're a whole different other ball game. But for the most part, these rookies look really good. And
this is the joy of it, Jacob. We haven't gotten to do this in years. Yes.
Mason, Carson Schlesinger, that hit, man, when he was fired out of that cannon, it was insane. And the note that I wrote down that I wasn't going to forget was Andrew Berry was talking about Mason Graham, about the technique and some of those things and some of the way they're deploying him in that attacking scheme, that he's taken to it much quicker than they expected. They were oh, Mason Graham's further along than what we expected. And, obviously not a ton with Dillon Sampson, that he's got like a ton of run there, but like the two at the top especially, like, and then Harold Fannin, very limited as well, but his training camp and then into today, and he played some H-backets and things of that nature. I just think the young guys look good, and if this season ends up not being 10-win season, I think they have put some more building blocks in place to get back there.
Yeah, and again, and I think for a lot of us who are being realistic about this team, we understand, that 25 may not give us, essentially, what we're hoping for. But a lot of it is hopefully for 26, and knowing that it starts in 25 with a Mason Graham, with a Carson Schlesinger, hopefully with a Sampson, and maybe a Judkins thrown into it. That's really part of it. The Fannin touchdown today was big, and as I put it out there was somebody who had like a ripping tweet of Fannin that I had never even seen, so I kind of just threw my 2 cents in on that, and I see Browns fans had fun with that.
Yes,
I'm gonna go to the wide receiver room. Look, Jerry Jeudy is one of my Browns wins, and Pete left early probably because he knew this is where I was going to go. I was screaming for Jerry Jeudy at like 3 opportunities. 2 off seasons ago, trade deadline. This was a guy that I just felt was being, so you have Jeudy. Tillman, it's really weird because, for a bigger wide receiver, it seems weird that we're always bringing up injury concerns. For a guy who's the biggest wide receiver in the room, you would think we're not always talking about injury concerns. I really like Thrash's development in this offseason. I still feel like he was one of the players the Browns did a major disservice on last year. When you knew it was over, you needed to get a guy like Jamari Thrash on the field more often, and the Browns just were really hesitant to do it till really late. So there's your top 3. Now, I see no reason to keep Carter because he's a returner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you want to do that, that's fine. But I'm not keeping Carter and Deontay Johnson. So if you want Deontay Johnson because of the receiving ability, then I can't have Carter here to return kicks. Okay, it's one or the other. Gage Lavardane is an absolute lock to this roster. I don't want to hear any way whatsoever. You have seen this young man excel in the return game. You have handed him the ball. You have thrown him the ball. This guy, he has excelled. There's highlights of him working with Joe Flacco. There's highlights of him working with Shedeur Sanders. There's highlights of him working with Dillon Gabriel, even a little bit of Kenny Pickett. When you talk about UDFAs, and Pete, I know, wrote an article probably a couple of weeks ago that it could be really a crazy large amount of UDFAs that could make this team. And Gage Lavardane is one of those guys. And when you move around so much in college, I understand you do it because you think it's opportunity, but it does kind of bite you in the can because you don't necessarily have loyalty at a school you're at. So Lavardane could have put up monster numbers if he had not continuously moved around. But because he did, when he went everywhere, he now became, new man, had to work his way in, da-da-da-da. But that is not a guy you move off your roster. Bond is here. There's no choice about that. So for me, it comes down to Carter or Deontay Johnson. If you want Carter for the return ability, that's fine, because I tell you what, Deontay Johnson, the thing has just not worked out the way we thought it was going to. I thought Deontay Johnson was going to come in here and was going to look like the second best wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns next to Jerry Jeudy. And I'm not even sure he's looked better than Jamari Thrash, and he hasn't looked better than Gage Lavardane. So, I just don't see the way that works. So if you want to keep Johnson because you think it's there receiver-wise, then Lavardane does some returning. Jerome Ford is not a terrible kick returner, and he's done that for the Browns in the past. So you're only keeping one of these 2 veterans. I would like this room young with Jeudy as your 1, and that's kind of where I'm at with that. Everybody, look, we appreciate you, and I had no idea the time flew by like it did. I swear to God. Once Fred got in here, all of a sudden, man, that thing went from 20 minutes to 50 minutes in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But it's great though. Fred here with getting everything from the inside. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of content coming here. I'll give you guys a show tomorrow. I'm probably going to try go 53 man-ish, and then just maybe some more thoughts from today. Jacob will be busy. Certainly Pete will be busy, and we'll try to get you guys our thoughts and get this pumped out here for you as well. Actually, Jacob, are you around tomorrow?
Yeah, should be.
Let's try to find one. Maybe Jacob and I we can kind of go maybe a little dueling 53 tomorrow, and try to see where, or at least draw some 53, so where we may agree, disagree. But look, as I always tell you people, none of this happens without you. Okay, people have to read, people have to watch. Otherwise, this is, Google Hangouts, 15 years ago. But you guys make this place what it is. The OBR is the brand that it is for the amount of years that it is because of you people. And, well, most of the fans of the OBR, they're older. Well, hi, I'm older. So that's why I appreciate the fans of the OBR so much. Absolutely. Big hearts all around. Browns finished the preseason 3-0. There were some really nice positives from this preseason and this training camp. And, the thing that kind of stinks about this is, and there was, I forget who the player was, but there was a player had a tweet today and he was in the airport getting a beer and it wasn't a Browns player. And it was like, nothing's better than the airport beer from when you've been released for the 7th time. And that's the realization of this. Guys are, the dream could be dead or they got to go another avenue to do it. But this roster is going to go from 90 to 53 by Tuesday at 4 p.m., which means, 37 guys, the dream's over or, at least temporarily put out for now. But again, we pick it up here and, we knew it was going to be a fun offseason. We really knew it was going to be a fun offseason to cover this team with all that was going on. And I think, I can speak for myself and probably a lot of us here that I think our expectations were probably a little bit higher for this team right now than they were maybe if you asked us before training camp started. Who knew, besides Pete Smith, that a guy like Aiden Huntington was going to come in and be a player? Or Gage Laverdane. You know what I'm saying? So, this is why it's fun. This is why it's great. Everybody, have yourselves a great night. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll be with you guys as soon as tomorrow. The OBR does what the OBR does. Everybody, have a great night, and we will talk to you all soon.